Mr. Chair, we're ready to go whenever you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the July 16th, 2020 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Committee. This meeting is being held by video conference. My name is Tony Blatt and I'm the chair of the committee. No physical location will be provided for this DDRC meeting. The meeting will instead be live streamed from remote locations. We want to request that everyone joining us today, except committee members, keep your microphone muted until you are called on to speak. As instructed in the agenda, those who called or emailed us in advance to let us know your name, contact number, and agenda item you wish to speak about will be recognized first. Before the DDRC votes on each item, I will ask if any members of the public wish to speak. Anyone speaking will be given 3 minutes to speak. Since you are muted, when I call on you, please unmute yourself. On a phone, you will press *6 and then state your name and address for the record before you speak. On a desktop or laptop, you will hover your cursor over the microphone icon to remove the diagonal red line. For anyone speaking today, including committee members, please identify yourself when you begin to speak. If we lose our connection for this meeting, the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Downtown Design Review Committee meeting on Thursday, August 20th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. by video conference. The agenda and documents are located at https://agenda.okc.gov/meet.aspx. You would then select agenda on the right side of the Downtown Design Review Committee meeting for today's date, July 16th, 2020, to see the agenda. When you click on an agenda item, the relevant documents will come up in the box to the right. And with that, Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee Member Blatt?
Present.
Committee Member Bates?
Present.
Committee Member Jones?
Present.
Committee Member Kriegel?
Present.
Committee Member Richards? Committee Member Sauer?
Present.
Thank you. And Committee Member Trujillo? Mr. Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda is approval of the June 18th minutes. Those minutes are included in your packet. And if there is any discussion, we can hear it. And if not, I'll accept a motion.
This is Julie Kriegel. I move that we accept the minutes.
This is Corey Bates. I'll second that.
I have a motion and I have a second. While we're waiting for those to be input into PrimeGov, as soon as they are, I'd like for everybody to vote in PrimeGov. And in order to vote in PrimeGov, you'll need to step out of the Zoom meeting window and open the live meeting portion of PrimeGov. That is where you will vote through.
Hi, y'all. This is Jennifer. Sorry about the delay. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty with the motion button.
Jennifer, would you like to do a roll call vote on this item? Or do you want to see if we can make this happen?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, a roll call would be able to move past this item and move forward.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Committee Member Blatt?
Yes?
Committee Member Bates?
Yes.
Committee Member Jones?
Yes.
Committee Member Kriegel?
Yes.
Committee Member Sauer?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, those are all ayes. This motion passes.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item number 3, and that is cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4, continuance request. We have one item that's requested to be continued, and that is DTCA-20-00045 at 601 West Reno. And am I correct that we need a motion to continue this item?
This is Laura, and I defer to.
Yes, you need a motion,
Thank you.
Susan.
Okay, could I have a motion from a committee member to continue this item?
This is Corey Bates. Has there been a specific meeting it's been requested to continue to, or does it just default to the next meeting?
I apologize. This is Laura, Planning Department. In the staff report, I recommended that we continue it to your next meeting, your meeting in August, which I believe is the 20th.
Okay, this is Corey Bates. I move to continue item 4A to the August meeting.
This is Gary Jones. I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second, which is being input in PrimeGov currently. And as soon as that is through, if everybody will cast their vote in PrimeGov. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is item number 5, and that is the consent docket, and there are no items on the consent docket. Under cases for individual consideration, item 6A is DTCA-19-00080R1 at 1111 North Dewey Avenue. Laura, do you want to introduce this item?
Michael Philbrick is the planner working on this case.
Okay. Michael, good morning. Would you like to introduce this?
Michael Philbrick, Associate Planner with the Current Planning and Urban Design Division. This item is for a consideration of the installation of a new emergency generator along with enhanced landscaping at the base of the required screen wall and the construction of a kind of a two-piece 14-foot tall screen wall. The frontal portion that faces northwest 11th Street is built with metal, and the rear portion that abuts the building is built with CMU and a stucco coat of plaster on the outside. Both walls are 14 feet tall and require a variance because they exceed the maximum wall height requirement. This is basically a revisiting of the same issue that we faced about a year ago, a meeting on July 25th in 2019, where they had requested the same basic set of improvements in terms of the installation of the generator and the screen wall. However, at that time, they had requested a 12-foot screen wall, and it turned out that the generator they were installing at that time was about 9'10", and the committee recommended approval of that variance. But when it ended up going to the Board of Adjustment, there were more fine point questions asked at that point, and the committee found out, the board inquired as to the need for the additional height on the wall, and it was agreed that the wall should be shortened from 12 to 10, which was sufficient to screen the 9'10" generator at that time. Since that time, the applicant has come to the conclusion that they need a larger unit, a larger emergency generator unit. This is basically in part due to the fact that they are removing an existing generator in a penthouse part of the building that was to work in parallel with the generator that had been proposed last year. And due to the age of that existing generator, they've decided to remove that and just provide one generator that will provide all the power that's necessary for emergency services there at the hospital when the power goes out. Consequently, this is a larger generator. I believe the height is 13'10" now, and that's about 4 feet taller than the 9 foot. And just to backtrack a little bit, because the variance that was granted by the board last year was specific to the 10-foot height that was being allowed for the height of that screen wall, they need to come back and obtain a new variance to replace the 10-foot limit with a new 14-foot limit. And that's why, in large part, this item is back before the committee today. Our analysis in the staff report is very much along the same lines that we used to analyze the initial screen wall request last year. We came to the conclusion in conjunction with the discussions with the applicant that there really isn't any place else on the site to site a emergency generator of this size rather than on a part of the site that fronts a street. And consequently, because of that, they do need to screen it. And accordingly, the screen wall does need to be of sufficient size to actually conduct the screening. So with the given location of the proposed generator and the given size of the proposed generator, the 14-foot height is basically necessary to satisfy the screening requirements. I do want to point out that this generator has an 8,200-gallon fuel storage component associated with it, integrated into the unit. That use it qualifies as a above ground flammable liquid storage restricted in terms of the size of the tank. Accordingly, per the DTD1 use regulations, it's allowed, but it's allowed only by special exception to be heard by the Board of Adjustment. So in conjunction with the variance request on the screen wall, the board will also be considering the special exception request for the fuel tank associated with the generator. In conclusion, one other point. Because this wall is so much taller, 4 foot taller than the previous iteration of this screen wall, and because it's in close proximity to the streetscape and the sidewalk pedestrian pathway along Northwest 11th Street, we worked hand in hand with the applicant to get some beefier landscaping at the base of the screen wall that faces the sidewalk and Northwest 11th Street as a means to help soften and perhaps help minimize the size of the wall. And they were very cooperative in working with us on that aspect of the project. And as a result, their plans do reflect that additional landscaping. In conclusion, we are recommending approval of the project and recommending also that the committee provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment supporting the request for the height variance on the screen wall. That completes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the committee may have.
Does the committee have any questions for staff? And if not, does the applicant have anything that they would like to add to this item?
I do not at this time. Michael covered it pretty well.
Okay. Does the committee have any?
Sorry, could you please identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Amanda LaBrosse with Miller Architects.
Thank you.
Does the committee have any questions for the applicant?
This is Corey Bates. I've got 2 questions. With regard to the landscape, I believe it's planned to have red tip Latinas. Do we know what the anticipated height of those that landscaping will mature to?
I believe they mature to about 6 feet.
The second question relates to the color of the metal panel that looks to be selected. In the packet, I believe Tundra is identified as the Finnish color, and it looks on the cut sheet for the colors that Tundra's somewhat of a cool gray. And the building itself seems to be a collage of warmer tones. And so I was wondering what the thought process was on selecting that tundra color versus one of the warmer, maybe browns.
We chose it as sort of a neutral color. I don't think we'd be opposed to changing the color, but I don't know that it would be brown. It would probably be more of the almond, is what was requested by SSM.
Okay. Given the scale of the enclosure, it feels more like a building element than necessarily a fence or a screen that's outside of a building. Certainly the elevation on A301, that north elevation, you can see how with that 14-foot height, it really aligns with the rest of the building and becomes a building element. So I would be in favor of a warmer tone that better fits within the palette of the existing building.
Okay.
This is Tony Blatt. I have a question in regards to the storage tank that sits underneath the generator. Has there been any coordination in regards to a requirement for a containment basin that is going to be underneath this tank? Has that been brought up in any way, either from DEQ or through the permitting process or through your review of what's going to be installed in this location?
I have not heard mention of that. As of now, it just sits on a housekeeping pad.
I think that needs to at least be noted that a containment basin, if it needs to be installed, then visually it needs to tie in with what is being presented this morning. So I think if there's any kind of a requirement for a containment basin, that it should at least come back before staff for review before moving forward.
Okay.
But otherwise, I don't have any questions. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak to this item?
This is Laura from the Planning Department, and can I just get clarification from Mr. Bates? When you're talking warmer tone, were you going to be specific about the actual color?
I will, I can provide, I think there's 4 on that color sheet that fall within a warmer range that would better suit the building than the Tundra. So I can give all 4 of those as options, or I believe the applicant noted the almond would be their choice, if not the Tundra, which I'm fine with as well.
This is Barry Haynes. I'm the Director of Engineering at St. Anthony Hospital. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
One of the two colors that we chose, or that because we had the same question as to the Tundra color, and it was we were informed that was the color that had previously been approved by the DDC, DRC. One of the colors that we would have selected would have either been the almond or the bone white. The other question that you had concerning the storage tank, the fuel storage tank for the generator design, that tank itself is double lined, and it contains a double bladder in it for the purpose of leakage, and it has leak detecting availability with that design.
That's perfect. That answers my question then.
So Laura, this is Corey Bates. Laura, to answer your question, to me, I would, my personal recommendation would be to use the almond over the Tundra.
Okay, thank you. I would assume your motion or someone's motion is going to include that specificity.
If there are no more questions for the applicant or comments from the audience, I would entertain a motion from a committee member.
This is Corey Bates. I move that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report with the following two conditions. A, the applicant shall obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment for the maximum fence height requirements, and B, the color almond be used for the metal panel finish.
This is Gary Jones. I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. If everybody would cast their vote in PrimeGov.
This is, oh, well.
See that that motion passes. I believe we need a second motion.
Yes, bear with me, please. I also move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the maximum fence height requirements.
Gary Jones, I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion and we have a second. If everybody will cast their votes in PrimeGov. Thank you all. So that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item 6B, and it is case DTCA 20-00050 at 700 Northwest 4th Street in the DBD. Laura, do you want to introduce this case, this item?
Thank you. First, I just want to point out that we sent some additional information to the committee earlier in the week that went with this item, which included 2 renderings and some percentages that I'll get to here in a minute about the material proposed for cladding. This is located at the southeast quadrant of Northwest 4th and North Chartel. As you're looking at some pictures of that area right now and the surrounding development. The only item that was in the staff report for discussion concerned, well, there were several. One dealt with the fact that they're proposing to be set back more than 10 feet from part of the street right-of-way on North Chartel. The issue that they have is there is some existing utilities that are located in a utility easement. There are several that are located within this easement, and it would be extremely costly to relocate, if in fact it is possible to relocate the utilities that are within that easement. So they are proposing to set their building back about 15 feet, so only 5 more feet, but they would still need a variance for that. Also discussed in the staff report was they are proposing a parking structure. The unique thing about the parking structure is it is going to be totally surrounded by the building, so you will not see it. And the parking structure is proposed to be constructed of cast-in-place concrete. And the guidelines and regulations have cast-in-place concrete is allowed, but it needs to have a finished surface. So staff's opinion was, since it is going to be located within the building, that there was no need to provide that finished surface on the cast-in-place concrete. Another item that was discussed in the staff report dealt with the exterior cladding material, and that was one of the items we had additional information provided on. This project proposes to use cementitious siding in about 3 different formats. The guidelines are specific about what is allowed, and there is some specifics on certain material on maximums. However, for cementitious siding, it only addresses it for non-residential uses and for single and two-family residential uses. It doesn't really address it for multifamily. It does reference additional cladding and accent materials can be allowed on a case-by-case basis, and that's essentially what we're talking about here. So we've had several other buildings in the past that have had cementitious siding of various styles, various percentages of the exterior of those buildings, such as West Village, the Lift, R2. I know there's several more that are in the downtown area. The applicant has indicated that the exteriors proposed to be 69% cementitious hardy products, 30% glass, and 1% brick. On this rendering that's on right here, and you can leave that right here for a bit, Cameron, you can see some of the brick on the lower level. There is a significant amount of glass on each of the facades. And the fiber cement panels are found to be resistant to cracking, splitting, rotting, and swelling, which could make them an appropriate cladding material for Oklahoma weather extremes. However, there could be a concern over the amount of that product that is being used. And that is something for discussion with the committee. What this view also shows you is where, as you look to the right, where it turns totally white on the exterior facade is where it is set back 15 feet from the street right of way, and that is where all the utilities are located. And I just wanted to point that out. And I think, Cameron, can you go to the next one, which I think is the last one, which is the view looking to the west, just so that we can show that. But then I'd like you to go back to the previous rendering and just kind of leave it there. I think that's just a better view for us as we're discussing this. Staff doesn't have an issue with it being set back 15 feet. I think the building immediately to the south is where the communications, the 911 communications is, and I believe there is all kinds of utilities running to that building for their use. And I can imagine it would be extremely costly to try and relocate those, and finding a place to relocate those too. So staff also wanted to bring up that yesterday some items came up that were pointed out by the Public Works Department, and I've discussed this with the architect and the engineer on the product. The issues that Public Works is concerned about are something that this project was going to be addressing anyway, which deals with the set-in parking spaces, the ADA accessibility at the corner, as well as the site triangle encroachment at the corner. And in discussions with the architect and the engineer, and they have agreed with this additional condition that I am going to be including here momentarily, which is that they're going to have to get approval from Public Works for those three items: the inset parking spaces, the ADA design at the corner, and the site triangle encroachment. As currently recommended and listed, I did not include the inset parking places because they're leaving the majority of the curb alone, and they were just going to be doing modifications at the intersection. So that is not in contrast or contradicting anything that was being recommended by staff. So with that in mind, staff is recommending approval with a couple of conditions. One, that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the regulation requiring the first two floors to be at or within 10 feet of the street right away. Second condition that staff is adding, which is the applicant shall get approval from the Public Works Department for the inset parking spaces, the ADA design at the corner, and the side triangle encroachment. Then there is another recommendation that needs to come from the committee if you support the variance on the setback, and that would be providing a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for that variance for exceeding the 10-foot maximum setback. And I'm here to answer questions. The architect, Zach Woods, is on the line, as well as, I'm trying to make sure if he's still there, the engineer was on the line. Tim Johnson, yes, and he's still on the line.
Thank you, Laura. Does the committee have any questions for staff? If not, does the applicant have anything that they would wish to add to the presentation?
This is Zach Woods with Gardner. No, I think Laura kind of hit all the high points and everything that we've discussed with her. So I'm open to any questions or conversations that you guys may want to have.
Thank you. Do any committee members have questions for the applicant?
This is Corey Bates. One question. Could you talk about the thought process behind the amount of cementitious fiberboard that's been planned with this design?
Sure. I think there's a couple variables. One, we have a big building here, roughly 320 feet square. It's all residential. There is no true commercial. It's either live works or apartments. And so we wanted to really, a pedestrian oriented material, but we also wanted to play with some textures around the building and then also assist in the install of all those materials. So we really wanted to give a focus to the live works on the corner with the masonry. And then we have the shingle that you see. Basically, if it's a black in color, it's the textured shingle. So you get a nice little sheen and texture as you drive by or walk by, and then it shifts to the siding on the white. And then we have a little bit of the hardy smooth around the windows to give appearance of a little bit larger openings in different proportions throughout the facades. You'll notice that the window pattern changes on different parts of the facade. And so we're really trying to play with textures and patterns and proportions on this project over material for multiple reasons. We're 5 stories. You get into multiple challenges when you're trying to brick up that much 5 stories. And then, it also helps with long-term installation over the project construction life, and that we can have less scaffolding around the building, which is right on 2 active streets. Our building is relatively close to the curb already with the setback and the property line. And so we have some, we didn't want to have to close lanes for safety and things for those things as well. And obviously there's a budget conversation always on these projects of this scale and of this intent of type of housing that we're doing here. And so those are all the elements that went into making these decisions on this project specifically.
So I've got a question. This is Tony Blatt. I have a question in regards to the painted materials that are going to be used for the cementitious siding. I didn't see specifically, I saw that it's painted. When you get into blacks, they've got a tendency to chalk out over time. Can you give a little bit of detail on the performance level of the paints that you're planning on using for this, since the majority of this building is a painted and therefore maintenance surface?
Sure, we're looking at a couple of different options. One, we're looking at if we have any pre-finished options from Hardy from the factory where they have baked on finishes for some of their sidings. We're exploring those options. It's a little bit harder to do, as you know, in black than it is would be a white or a more neutral. And then in our past projects that we've done paint, we've done some high-end exterior. We've done some latex paints and some other acrylics on this product that do really well since the product is pre-primed. It's not a raw material. And so it takes really well. It has about a, We have projects that are going on about 10 years that have not been repainted yet. So we've had great success here in Oklahoma in the blacks and the whites. And so, we haven't specified that paint yet as to which one we want to use, because we are looking into the darker tones of the black on the cedar shake. But we really don't have any concerns about the painted surfaces on maintenance and the chalking. At least we haven't had any problems in the past on that product.
So what I'm hearing is you're actually taking that into consideration, and you're selecting your paint materials based on the fact that you're using a black.
Yes,
and
sir.
it has that. Okay, that answers my question. Do we have any other questions for the applicant from committee members? And do we have any questions or comments from the public?
So this is Corey Bates. I don't have any more questions, but I do want to talk about the project and talk about the materials. Certainly among the committee, I'd like to know how everyone else feels as well. For me, I very much appreciate the deployment that's being shown with regard to massing and varying color, varying texture, the details around the windows. And I'm very aware of budget considerations as well, but I do have strong concerns with the amount of fiber cement board being presented here. The guidelines, as Laura mentioned, don't specifically address multifamily residential, but there's a couple things I do want to point out. When the guidelines talk about percentage of materials, they do talk about it in terms excluding windows and doors. So we received percentages on the materials on this building, but if we were to exclude the windows, as the guidelines typically do, this project is at 99% fiber cement board and 1% brick, which I feel is more than the intent of the guidelines are looking for. I do have concerns about locating it at the ground floor level with regard to maintenance and traffic and the product's durability at ground level. There were some other projects that were referenced where these products have been approved. However, on those projects, the majority of the ground floor is brick or another material. So I do have concern about this, the amount that's being proposed, especially at the ground floor.
Gary Jones. Corey, can you explain the concern by using that much fiber cement panel? What are we concerned about as far as potentially what may happen?
So I am concerned about the look overall and the quality of the material compared to the materials that are specifically listed as should be used within the guidelines. I think this product is a budget conscious product, and I do think it shows. And so at ground level, the pedestrian experience is interacting directly with that product. And then over time, as Tony mentioned, this is a painted product that will require maintenance, and having a painted product at the ground level will endure more wear and tear than the upper levels, and be a maintenance issue over time. I also have concern about setting a precedent to accept a building that is nearly 100% fiber cement board. I think the guidelines, again, they don't specifically address multifamily residential, but what they do address is nowhere in terms of 99% fiber cement board. The way I read the guidelines and interpret the intent, I think this amount of this material exceeds that, and I would prefer, or I would suggest that the ground floor level be re-examined.
I agree with your comments, and specifically was going to make bring up the item of setting precedent, specifically because whenever I look at these drawings and renderings, I immediately notice that they are well detailed, well designed. Everything feels really good on this project. It makes me want to just immediately approve it, but I also realize that that would give an individual who is not giving the same care to a project to come forward and in a less sensitive manner present the same materials at the ground floor level, and then we would be really challenged by having said yes and turning around and saying no, specifically because of an aesthetic item. So from a standpoint of performance and precedence at the ground floor level, I don't think it has to necessarily go to brick, but I do think a material that is more consistent with the guidelines and one that is less maintenance and one that would be able to stand up to precedence would be more appropriate.
This is Julie Kriegel. I'm going to ask you architects on the committee a question. The fact that they haven't determined yet exactly what material they're going to be using, if I'm correct, Zach, on that, is that cause for concern at all, or are you comfortable? I hear you saying, Tony, that you're comfortable with the detail they're putting into this. So I'm just wondering, do we have enough information today to even take a vote?
I think we did.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, this is Corey Bates. Julie, to answer you directly, the product is selected as a fiber cement panel. The fiber cement panels are painted as a way of finishing them. They have not yet concluded exactly what type of paint or what type of approach they will take to paint the product. So, but from my perspective, in the end, it is a painted product. And to, even if you take the best measures to ensure that it's a good paint and it's put on well, to put a painted product at ground level will be a maintenance issue down the road.
Okay, thank you. Because what my concern was, Corey, was you're telling me that your concern is really about the panels themselves and less about the paint. You do not seem to have a concern about how that is finished then. That's, if I understand correctly.
My concerns lie in the product itself because of the percentage of the product used and that it will be a painted finish.
Yeah, and I'll have a couple of comments here, if I may. Again, this is Zach Woods with Gardner. And we've taken all of these things in consideration and had much internal debate as well, and how to treat this ground floor. Architecturally, we've explored a couple of things at the ground level and ultimately felt like the project felt more cohesive architecturally, letting that siding come to the ground versus putting it on a plinth, if you will. It changes the aesthetic a little bit. And then I will say that a majority of the facades that are at sidewalk, or that would be adjacent to a lot of public use, tend to have a buffer of landscaping, be it 5 feet, 10 feet in some areas to 2 feet in others. On the north, where we have a little bit less, due to our site being a wedge, we have some areas where we can create buffers between at least people and the facade. And then we won't have any major irrigation. Those would all be drip systems. So we wouldn't be having a lot of water other than rainwater, degrading that finish closer to grade And then our standard is it's never within 6 inches of grade anyway. We'll still have our foundation and foundation edges to help us protect that first layer or two. Obviously, cementitious siding is not susceptible to water damage, even if it's left exposed for extended amounts of time. It is a cementitious based product, as you guys know. So we did take a lot of consideration into all that. We also have aluminum and hollow metal entrances to the apartments on the first floor to try to offset some of this, some of the concern about getting beat up around these entrances as well as sidewalks. And then this rendering is very basic in its landscape presentation, but we'll have much more extensive landscaping on the north and the west after we are able to finalize the PD plan with civil and the city, so we know where we can and cannot put trees and also just landscaping up against the building. There where we step back on the west, and then the north has some opportunity for additional layerings of landscaping as you make your way across the north facade.
This is Corey Bates. I don't want to get away from the fiber cement panel discussion, but there was one other item I wanted to address. I didn't hit on it because of the rendering here, but it looks like on the west side there are steps and sort of porches that allow you to enter the on-grid units at the southwest corner. And I believe those are noted to be finished as Core-10 steel. And I'm wondering or hoping that you could describe what is planned to manage the rainwater runoff on those panels. Core-10 steel by nature will rust over time. That's how it protects itself. It becomes a durable material, but rainwater will streak down the panel and pull some of that rust onto landscaping, sidewalks, porches, etc. So I wanted to hear how you all plan to address that.
Yeah, and that Core-10 only shows up as a guardrail for the patio. It's not actually on the building. And then we would have a small gravel strip below it that would manage that, so it wouldn't run onto the sidewalk and stain the sidewalk. And then, we may or may not have some landscaping below that. We're really tight in that area, but we would definitely be having a management system of a decorative gravel that would capture any runoff off of those panels.
This is Corey again. Thank you for that. I don't want to get away from the fiber cement panel discussion, but I wanted to make sure to clarify that within the content of the meeting.
Are there any questions or other further questions or comments from either committee members or from the public?
I appreciate.
I have a comment. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Ladies go first.
Thank you. This is Elise Kilpatrick. I own the two buildings in the large lot directly across the street on Dean McGee from Chartel. And I'm really excited about this project, but my concern is because my buildings have sit pretty low between Francis and Chartel, those two giant rains we've had over the past 6 years, prior to opening the storm sewer grates a little wider on 4th Street, both these buildings have flooded. And so that's a pretty big piece of ground over there. And I don't know that there's even a storm sewer opening over there, except maybe in front of the 911 call center. So, and I've got 4 on my side, and it just hasn't been enough. So anyway, I just am concerned that rainwater runoff won't overwhelm my side of the street.
This is Tony Blatt, and I believe that the civil engineer, Tim Johnson, is on the call. Is that correct?
That's correct. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Tim.
Yes.
Good morning.
Could you comment on how the rainwater water is being addressed with respect to Ms. Kilpatrick's comment?
Yes, and she's spot on. The Oklahoma City did a downtown drainage study a few years back, and Fourth and Chartel is in a hole and without a lot of relief. And I know the Flea has flooded, the banquet building has flooded. And as she mentioned, her Chartel and Detainee McGee wrestles with flooding as well. There's some large storm sewers that are undersized in the area. So our project will be taking our runoff from the interior of the project back to the southwest corner and putting it in an underground storm sewer structure that runs north and south through the vacated Lee Avenue right away. Any of the runoff that really hits the surface of the building to Fourth and to Chartel will be minimal with regard to how much runoff will be coming that way. So we'll be basically collecting what now surface drains off this lot and putting it in an underground system. So it should relieve some of the drainage on Chartel and Fourth. There are also inlets at the northeast corner of our project that we think are undersized, that as we do the bump out project for the parking on 4th Street, we're going to look at resizing those inlets over there, which should benefit also taking some of the water off the street before it gets to the intersection of 4th and Chartel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I may add, this is Karen Youngblood. I am a homeowner at Sycamore Square to the east of the project, and want to reiterate that we have talked with the architects and the developer and Tim Johnson and made them aware of the water issue, that the current existing drain is undersized and or damaged underground, because our entire parking structure, or our parking lot to the west of our property, backs up to the point that it's over doors from the bottom of a car. So we appreciate Tim mentioning this and that they're working with the city, and just want to reiterate our appreciation to this board for looking at all the different angles, and that issue is still of concern.
Do we have any other questions or comments on this item?
Gary Jones, I don't have any question. Well, I guess it is a question. I appreciate what you and Corey have talked about as far as the precedents that we would set with the fiber cement panels. I also appreciate the effort that Zach alluded that they're attempting to do in order to minimize or to ensure that some of the concerns with the fiber cement panels don't come to realization. But I guess my question is there any specific modification or something we could add to the adoption of the motion that might assist us with this precedent setting for 100% fiber panel on a multifamily building?
This is Corey Bates. Gary, not one that I can think of offhand. I think it would be a little too prescriptive to design the building here. I think personally, I think that's a slippery slope, and I think that it, from a precedent standpoint, does that, any kind of details that are embedded within that would become part of the precedent as well. I would like to see as a minimal effort, the ground floor be revisited. That's my personal stance. I don't believe I can approve this as is today, given the amount of fiber cement panel that's on there. And I strongly reiterate Tony's point that this building has been treated very well, and the product has been used and deployed nicely, but that's not always going to be the case. And it's not a trap I want to get into, where another application that doesn't pay as much attention and spend as much time looking at the details will fall back on a precedent of this amount of this product.
This is Julie Kriegel. So I just want to make sure I understand, again, not being an architect, I go to you guys all the time for your expertise on these matters, but you like the basic design so far as the windows, and you're comfortable with the design, correct? It's really about the balance of materials used. Is that correct?
This is Corey Bates. It's about the amount of fiber cement panel. And so the guidelines, they don't address multifamily, but they do address other uses, and so the guideline says for non-residential uses, composite materials such as fiber cement panels may be allowed, but should be limited to 30% of the total exterior building materials of any facade, not including the windows and doors. And so we don't have multifamily specifically addressed in the guidelines, but on another use, we do have it specifically addressed, and it limits it to 30% excluding the windows.
Yeah.
And so here we're at 99%. And I don't think that that's close enough to allow it, to be quite honest. If in other uses, the guidelines restricts it to 30%, not including the windows, and multifamily is not specifically addressed, my interpretation is that it would be something similar. Now, similar obviously could be subjective, but the difference between 30% and 99% is not similar, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
If I may, this is Zach with Gardner again. All right, Corey, is your primary concern the north and west facing facades primarily, or when we're considering, as we're talking out loud here about this ground floor, I'm thinking about the maintenance and things, which is going to be mostly impacted by the north and west facades, since they're the most exposed to people, and they're the one right on the property line for the most part. Would the board, or would you, Corey, consider having, if we can look at and find a way architecturally to make a black masonry brick work on the first floor of the building in which touches the property line? So that would be the black portion of the west facade, and the entire north facade could become a mason, maybe it's a black brick on the first floor in conjunction with the red brick. And then where the building stepped back away from the public realm, where we have much more buffer landscaping patios, it could stay a siding essentially where it's white in this diagram. And then, but where people are running their hands along the building, it's a masonry product or a brick.
So this is Corey Bates. To answer your question, yes, the north and the west are the priority facades out of the four, in my opinion. And the proximity of the north to the sidewalk is probably the highest priority, since the northwest corner has already been proposed with brick. And to the southwest corner, given the porches and the Corten steel, I do think that does change the appearance along that southwest corner. But of the four facades, the north and west would be the priority for revisiting.
Yeah, so what I would gently propose here to discuss would be that we could shift that first floor of the black mass that you're seeing in this rendering to a brick product, still in black, so we hold a similar architectural gesture only on those, which would be the entire north facade. And then that little bit there on the west, there at the end of the red brick on you know, where the black returns to the ground, that would become a black brick as well. And then allow the white to stay the siding as specified with the protection of landscape and patios. And then the east elevation, if you want to, someone can pan down one image that will show the east side, which would be the Sycamore Square side of the building. That basically that principle would apply here as well.
This is Julie Kriegel, but we still have the issue of the percentage that is this cement paneling, right? And setting a precedent.
I do believe, yes. I believe that the numbers would need to be presented. We would need to be able to feel comfortable about the facts. Again, this is being done well, but another project might be same materials not executed as well. And we only get to judge it. We need to have a level or some kind of equity in how we're judging the projects. So I do think that the percentages do need to be confirmed and coordinated with us so that we're making a decision about how we go forward.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, I mean, you're still talking about a very, a great amount of the cement board or paneling, correct?
Yeah, I'm addressing
still a real high percentage.
That's correct. I'm addressing the maintenance concern, not necessarily the percentage of materials concern.
Yeah, and I think the issue, what we're all kind of getting to is the fact that we just don't want to set that precedent that then is challenged over and over and over again. I mean, I think that's the concern. The design, I like the design. I understand the maintenance, and I appreciate how much thought you are putting into this, but from the guidelines we have, I think the concern is just making sure that we're careful for future items that are presented to us. No. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys.
Mr. Chairman, this is Tim Johnson. Being a longtime land use fellow, I would not be able to sleep tonight without saying this. Each project, the purpose of this board is that each project should be based on its own merits, not on the worry of precedents. And maybe the staff could address this, or the city attorney's office can address this. But it also, you guys are working with what's called a guideline. And I've heard about 10 different times how well everybody thought this was designed. And trust me, I've been involved with the design team for months, working on various iterations of how they can make this affordable home project a very good looking project and still be able to afford to build it. And I think Gardner's team has done a wonderful job in working around a lot of side issues, not just siding issues, but there's a lot of side issues on this, including major utility relocations. So I've just had to say that. I think that each project should be viewed on its own merits, and there should not be a concern for precedent setting because each project stands alone.
Is that the same interpretation of council, Laura?
Yeah, this is Laura McDevitt in the city attorney's office. So yes, each project does stand on its own, but I know that the committee is fully aware that that doesn't stop applicants coming before the committee, always citing to the use of materials down the street and as justification for their design. So yes, each project does stand on its own, but that is.
Sorry. Has the board enforced the 30% maximum cementitious on previous multifamily projects.
I'd have to
So,
planning staff on that.
so I do believe that there are projects that have been approved that were higher than 30%. I think some of them were referenced, but those projects, as I mentioned earlier, also address the ground level differently. And it did not, there's more of other materials at the ground level. And again, I don't know what the exact percentages were on those projects, but it was not as high as this one.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue the 99%, but let's look at Lift for a moment, that has commercial storefront on majority of the first floor on the corner, and masonry, which is about 12 inches wide between those storefronts. So if we start to look at percentages excluding glass, most of their upper floors are actually a 4x8 sheet of hardy panel on that project. So, you know, we're happy to explore the first floor, especially there on the north and the west, to accommodate the concerns about maintenance and percentages on this project. Another, you know, this project will always be seen from all four sides as well, where other projects are typically seen from 2 or 3. Sycamore Square is obviously not going anywhere anytime soon. The 911 call center is not going anywhere anytime soon, which has a large setback from our south property line. And then obviously we're right on north, on Chartel and 4th Street. So I would just consider, you know, consider your thoughts beyond the 99%, you know, allowing us to add some brick on that, those concerned facades north and west, and see if we can come to an agreement here as to what, if we can approve something more moving forward rather than continuing to next month.
I appreciate what the client, what the applicant is saying. I also appreciate Mr. Johnson stepping in and making a couple of comments. I agree. I would believe that there are probably a fair number of previous projects that have non-masonry products in excess of the 30%. And I'm not reviewing this with respect to a number. It's more of just looking at it specifically with respect to the sheer amount that was proposed. I understand that you're willing to look at the ground floor level. I'm not opposed to the masonry product for the black. I don't know that we can see the detail with respect to how the white is addressed. I know you said that it'll be buffered. There'll be some landscaping. There'll be ways in which the white is not in contact with the pedestrian. I think that needs to at least be presented in some way. I don't know if it can be presented and just coordinated with staff.
Yeah, can we
after the fact?
Site plan in this packet, please?
Sure. I mean, ultimately, it would be a motion, if a motion could be crafted to show. Zach, I think you wanted to speak to this.
So, yeah, like Corey said, the sidewalk is up against the building. We're about 14 inches off the property line because the property is not square, but our building is. And then on the west, you can see it is on the property line. Again, where you see the sidewalk up against the building, that's where we have the black, and we're proposing the brick replacement where we don't have brick. And then as you go further south on the west side, you start to see our patios get exposed there, and everything, and all the areas between the patios are landscaping. So the only people that have access to the building are the people who own that or who are renting that unit. So the sidewalk is, you know, it's a wedge shape, as you can see, but varies from about 4 feet all the way up to about 10 feet off the building for the common for the pedestrian. The south side will be is private, so there is no public access down there, that it's a maintenance drive and just basically egress from the building on the south. And then on the east, it is just a simple 10-foot area that will be loosely landscaped with some vertical trees to break up the facade and give a nice filtering landscape filter to the facade itself. But there is no pedestrian access from the public or tenants on the east side of the building. And so we will be, you know, completely protected essentially from any abuse and maintenance on the east and the south, pretty much all of the time. We'll also, you know, in the end, our foundation will be slightly above grade, as we all know. And so we won't be sitting directly on the ground with the product. On the south and the east, we'll be, you know, 6-12 inches out by the time it's all graded and foundations are poured. So that was my proposal for the west and the north, was to address the, you know, ones that are right up against the sidewalk itself.
This is Corey Bates. I very much appreciate all of that, and do agree that the north and the west are the priority facades. And I think if the ground level at those locations are revisited, as we've been talking about, that would push this in the right direction. I do agree with Tony that we have talked about this enough, and we've talked about enough of the building that it would be, I would be more comfortable seeing it than trying to put that into words as part of a motion here. I know that nobody wants cases continued, and I understand the implications of doing that completely. But I do think that the discussion that we've had here today necessitates that.
Then we'll oblige as needed.
This is Ron Bradshaw, Colony Partners. I'm the developer. May I say a few words?
Absolutely.
I've listened to this, and I completely respect the purpose of the design review committee, and you are particularly focused on design. As a developer, we have to there is a lot of issues that we have to take into account here. I think that Zach has proposed something that that I could certainly live with. But I've got to point out too that we've been negotiating with Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority, who has been heavily involved in the design review process for over a year. We have endeavored to fulfill other city requirements, which is that we are providing 72 of these units for affordable housing, which, as you probably realize, reduces the net operating income, which reduces the value, which reduces the debt, and requires more equity. And there's all just a string of issues here. And the other thing is that we are pressed to start in September on this. So I think if you take this, I just wanted to say I am for the first floor masonry on the north and west side. I would support it. I would say if you go pursue this idea of a very arbitrary percentage, I think that is the wrong direction. You've said you like the design. We like the design. We can afford to do it, but start fulfilling percentages. All that means is additional cost. And I think it's a great design. And I think we've offered a good alternative here. It would seem that I would like to see if you need to look at the brick, I understand that, but I would like to see if there's a way that we could do this without a continuance. Thank you.
One of the options that I heard you say was masonry for the full extent of the west and the north sides, which wasn't necessarily what was being discussed earlier. And although that sets up a little bit of an arbitrary, what is the final aesthetic, the way that works out. And I don't know if that would be the motion of a committee member. I'll let Corey comment.
Well, I guess my question would be maybe to staff of, you know, whatever motion we make here, and if it's embedded with conditions, any revisions will need to come back to at least staff for administrative approval. So I don't know that any outcome from today's meeting is going to produce a start motion tomorrow. I guess it's worth discussing what the difference is in time frame, but I can't imagine it's more than a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks difference between being administratively approved and coming back to gain approval through the committee's vote.
Ron.
Does Laura want to comment on, in the event that it was to come back to her for administrative approval, what would the time frame be for that?
Administrative approvals are granted on Mondays, and they have the same 10 business day appeal period attached to them. So just for example, let's just say hypothetically you all agree to something and Zach submits it tomorrow and I'm able to get it into Monday's batch, and that's a big if. And so what that time frame would look like would be it's July 20th, and so the effective date is the 4th, August the 4th. So, and I don't really think that's very likely, so it'd probably be at least 1 week beyond that. Approval on the 27th, effective on the 11th of August. So if it came back for administrative approval, the other way to look at that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, if you make that a condition of approval, for example, you say that where it's shown, the black on the first floor would be changed to black brick. And that was your condition of approval. And they submit that revised drawing, and I confirm that it addresses your condition, that actually wouldn't need a separate approval process, would it, Laura? That would just be part of the current process, and it would be meeting your condition, and the 10 business day appeal period, which starts tomorrow for this meeting, would be the only appeal period associated with that. Would you agree with that, Laura?
If the condition is that it be black brick and then they submit plans that it is black brick, then that wouldn't necessarily require any kind of administrative approval or discretion outside of what the committee's already decided. So the decision would be from today's date.
Okay, so with that in mind, the only incident where there would be an administrative approval involved would be if you direct them to do some type of redesign that we haven't even seen, which you're not talking about that. So with any luck, it sounds like we might be able to do this without putting another type of approval process with it. If that makes sense.
This is Ron Bradshaw. May I speak once again?
Sir.
you know, I want to work within the rules and within your guidelines. I mean, within your timing and so forth. And I'm not trying to be arbitrary. Corey, I would though like to clear up that I believe where on that west side where the white is, I think that does not need to be brick. And I think that it, if it is, it's going to be white brick. You know, I mean, it's
yeah, or a painted brick, Ron.
Or a painted, yeah, or a painted brick, and we could certainly I think do that. But listen, I appreciate the time you spend on this and the efforts and your thoughts. If you feel like it's got to be a continuance, okay. I mean, I want y'all to be happy with the building, and I want you to be happy with us as developers and this team, and I more importantly want you to be happy with the product when it's finished. If there's a way we can do it as pointed out, that's great. But I'm not. This is I want to work with you guys. So as our whole team does. Thank you.
If we could, if the board will agree, it sounds like we possibly could have a motion that would require us to replace any black cementitious product on the north or the west that go on the first floor to a brick product. Black, what color obviously does not matter, but it would be a masonry brick product over the cementitious siding. We would be acceptable to that and provide those appropriate drawings to Lhara to make sure that that is all above par and acceptable to the condition. We already have two conditions with the variance and the approval of the PD plans by Public Works as well.
So I do want to make this work. I don't want all of my comments to taint my desire to make this work. I do think this is a very nice project, both in its use and its design as it is. I believe given the attention of detail that has gone into this to date, I do, thinking about it more, have more confidence in what would be done in revising the ground floor. I do have one detail that I do want to address because we haven't specifically noted it, but the black fiber cement panel does wrap slightly around the northeast corner. And from a consistency standpoint, I would see if the reconsideration at the ground level would apply to all locations where the black fiber cement panel is located. So that would include a small portion of the east facade at the north end.
Yes, sir. Anywhere there's black cementitious siding on the exterior facades that go to the ground, we will replace that with a black brick product. So on the west, on the north, and this image you see here. And it'll wrap into that there's the little exterior notch that you see there between the black building and the white building, Corey. It would wrap back into that little recess as well. So that detail would be consistent around that black, kind of like it would be a masonry ribbon around the first floor all the way. There would be no black siding on the at grade.
I would be curious to hear other board members' opinions of including a condition like that and having it simply go back to staff.
This is Tony Blatt. I think that this particular approach is exactly what this board is supposed to try to achieve, a compromise that meets something that is still good and acceptable and creates a good project. I think that the location that the masonry is being discussed is appropriate. I really appreciate the comments about the fact that the way that this has been detailed for us to see gives us a sense of comfort with the fact that the way that it's going to be executed ultimately. I think the execution of the white panels to the ground are going to need extreme care, because even though they might not have individuals right next to them, or they might not have access, they're still going to be nearer the ground. I understand the 6-inch foundation edge. I think that's great. During construction, if this is a pre-finished product, it's not going to start off with grass next to it. It's going to have red earth, and staining of it is going to be an issue. I think all levels of care for a non-masonry product next to the grade are going to need to be done. And Ron has commented on the fact that his desire is for a good product over time. So that gives me some comfort as well.
Well, and we have an experienced contractor that's very familiar with these types of projects and these types of timeframes too. So we're confident with our entire team. CMS Willowbrook is already on board and working with us through this entire project. They built the West Village project. And so I feel like we have a really good team to ensure that all of these things do happen and will happen, because we're all committed to, building a product that quite frankly lasts longer than most people design buildings these days. So we really want to try to make that happen.
Gary Jones.
I was just going to say, Core, to answer your question directly, I think the approach that's being discussed is appropriate.
Yeah. And Corey, as another member of the board, I think that the modifications that have been discussed and the commitments that we have received from Ron provides me with a feeling of confidence that even though this may be a little bit different and precedent setting, that I think the objective of making sure we have a well-designed building that fits with the designs and the responsibility of this board, I think we're meeting all those. So I would feel confident moving forward with revisions of the masonry replacing the fiber cement panel where the black is located.
This is Julie. So again, overall, I mean, I'm happy with where this is kind of going. I'm just curious if not having consistent materials where the black is, where we're going from a painted brick or up to this cement panels, it's hard for me to envision that. So I'm guessing that is going to look good. Guys, I'm asking again your opinion on this. You're comfortable with that? Different materials there?
Well, so this is Corey Bates. Julie, I think that goes back to the how question, and probably was the reason for wanting to see it again. If we go back to the other perspective, I believe there's a slight reveal currently between at the northwest corner between the fiber cement panel and the masonry that's at the first floor.
Yeah, they're offset.
Would when you lay out if you were to lay out a black brick underneath the black fiber cement, would would that be flush, or would that have a similar type setback? Or maybe as a way of getting through this here, could you describe some of the detail that would occur at that transition?
Yeah, we would try, we would detail to where that mass would still feel like it's one cohesive plane. So we would have the brick flush with the in that case, it's a shake. It's a patterned shake pattern in the cementitious. So we would detail that where the black brick and the red brick were still offset from each other. So we're emphasizing those live work units that actually do have people's businesses on that corner. And then we would keep those flush, but we would, obviously there would be quite a few details in that area to execute that framing wise. And you know, we all know there's some tricks to get that framing flush with the brick versus being offset, but that would be our desire, is to detail it that way where it's all flush.
Corey, Tony, are you guys comfortable with that?
And to confirm, sorry, this is Corey. Just to confirm, the black fiber cement panel is the horizontally grooved panel.
The black is the shake. The white is the horizontal siding. And it is a little bit, it has a shadow line in it, Corey. The Colonial Smooth, there's a cut sheet is in this packet. It is not a true, just simple lap siding. It is that's the shake. If you go to the Colonial Smooth is the name of it. Keep one more. You see that shadow line, that is an actual relief in the top of the panel. It doesn't sit exactly flush, but it creates a pretty nice shadow line, about 1/2 to 3/4 inches wide versus a true lap where you just have the small shadow line of the overlap, from the hardy panel. So this isn't, or a hardy plank. This is a little bit more textured in a sense of shadow lines and texture on the facade than you would get with a standard hardy plank smooth. And the exposure is 6 3/4 consistent. On the hardy plank smooth standard, you can vary that between, I think, 4 inches up to 10 inches, but this one's a bit more consistent in its finish, but offers more shadow lines. So again, white is this Colonial Smooth. The black is the shake, which is, pretty intensely textured over the facade where it moves around. The seams will move. And it will be a straight edged shake, not a random edge. So it's it has a little bit of small M modernity on that, but gives us some texture, even though it's all painted the same color. So that, kind of changes as you walk down the street with light and shadow.
It's Tony Blatt. I can argue a lot of ways that this can be executed successfully, but I think one of the main key things is that the red and the brick cannot be in the red and the black brick cannot be in the same plane, which is what you're saying that would be done.
Correct.
So I think that is one of the ways that is really going to make this read appropriately. If they were to plane out, I think that would be an error. So your approach there, I think, is correct. With respect to aligning with the product above, I think there's enough differentiation of material that you're not trying to make one the other. And the way that the windows are going to flush out with both the brick and the siding above, I think that that's going to be attractive. I think the real key thing for success is not aligning the red and the black brick. And so in that regards, to answer Julie's question, and I'll let Corey answer it how he sees it, I feel like it's the correct approach.
And I would agree with what Tony just said.
Thank you, guys.
I know that we've discussed this at length, and again, I want to commend everybody for both the way that the conversation has went. It's been very pleasantly executed on all parts. Everybody has been speaking in the positive form, so that was great. I do think that we're heading in a direction that everybody is hopefully going to be satisfied with the compromises that have been made. If there are not any further discussions, I would entertain it.
This is Laura, and can I just kind of put some words to the two conditions that you don't have in writing in front of you, just to maybe help out? One, I just want to remind you that we do need, staff is recommending, a condition that the applicant shall get approval from the Public Works Department for the inset parking spaces, the ADA design at the corner, and the site triangle encroachment. And based on the conversation you all have been having, what I have heard you all kind of land on was that a condition to replace the first floor fiber cementitious product that shows as black on the west, the east, and the north facades with a masonry brick product. Now, I left out black masonry brick product. Maybe you want to include that in there, but I think that's kind of what I heard you guys saying. Just trying to help you with some wording.
Would anybody like to try to craft a motion on this item?
This is Corey Bates. I'll move that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report with the following 3 conditions. Condition A, the applicant shall obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the regulation requiring the first 2 floors to be at or within 10 feet of the street right-of-way. Condition B, the applicant shall obtain approval from Public Works regarding the inset parking, the ADA design at the corner, and the site triangle encroachment at 4th and Chartel. And third, condition C, that at the west, north, and east facades where the black fiber cement board is currently shown, that at ground level, that fiber cement board be replaced with masonry.
This is Julie Kriegel. I'll second it.
Cameron, I see that it is in the process of executing Plan Dev.
Yes, this is Jennifer. It looks like I need Committee Member Kriegel to put a vote in for me to close.
It doesn't give me that option.
Apologies for that. If you would verbalize your vote, I can capture it for you.
I'm sorry, you need me to second it again?
No, I need you to say aye or nay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, aye. I vote for the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is Ron Bradshaw. Can I say one more quick thing?
Absolutely.
I want to tell you how much we appreciate the time and the patience that you've shown here in this meeting, and I want to tell you how much I personally appreciate the service and the dedication and the commitment you have for the work you do. So thank you very much.
And I just have one clarification. Does this motion also give your recommendation of approval for the variance all in one, or is that a separate motion?
That's on me. Hold on. I'd also move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for variance to regulation requiring the first 2 floors be at or within 10 feet of the street right of way.
Gary Jones, second.
We have a motion and a second. If everybody would cast their votes in PrimeGov.
Again, I don't have that as an option. So I approve. Y'all just leaving me out of this today, huh?
The motion passes.
Thank you so much for your time and conversation today. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is item 7, and that is other business, and there are no items. Item 8 is going to be communications. We have several items under communications, and unless staff has anything specific they'd like to bring to our attention, we can move to the next item.
Nothing in particular
Okay.
on that.
Item 8B is comments from planning department staff.
Thank you for attending today. We do have a meeting in August. We anticipate it will once again be a virtual meeting. We're getting so good at those. So I'm going to need you guys to check your calendars. We've got several items, including another large new project. So getting excited about some of those projects coming in. And other than that, hopefully you didn't have any issues with your first official digital packet.
No, none.
Okay.
Well, Laura, this is Corey. On this large project that's coming up, is that coming for approval or for presentation?
Approval.
Okay.
It's one you saw when they rezoned the property to zone it into downtown.
Oh, okay. All right.
So most of you should be really familiar with that site. Not necessarily the actual project, but with the site.
Okay. Do we have any comments from committee members? Thank you again, everybody, for your time.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Corey.
I've got one. This is a question for Laura. In the staff reports, and if this was provided, I apologize, I missed it. But if in the staff reports we ever reference other projects, would it be possible to include the case number for those projects as well, to be able to quickly pull those up by searching the case number?
I apologize for that. I should have included those. It was not in for the two that I referenced, West Village and the lift, but I will try to get better and include those for you.
Okay. If there are no other comments, I will, our next meeting is on the 20th of August, and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Bye.